And it says preparing to go live. Thank you again for doing this. I'm so excited. All right, so looks like we are live. Welcome everyone to Hemp Your Health. I'm Christy Thiel, Director of Education at CETA System and your host. Hemp Your Health is a show about health, healing, and prevention. We bring on experts that share their expertise, their experience, and their wisdom for the betterment of humans, animals, plants, and the planet. And today's guest is truly a maverick of cannabis and plant medicine. The first time I heard Max Montrose speak, it was jaw-dropping. It was at a medical cannabis conference in Denver, and I was not the only one who was blown away hearing new stuff, like completely new stuff, mind-blowing stuff. So not only does he have an extraordinary way of exploring beyond the status quo, but he also discovers new frontiers in plant medicine. He was born and raised in Denver, Colorado, and he has fought for cannabis legislation since he was a young boy, even though he still looks very young now. He started... He's just not aging. He has...
No. But there's reasons for that. We can talk about that.
We should definitely talk about that. You've been educating people in the public and on cannabis medicine since 2018, and you founded the Trichome Institute in 2014. Max has published 3 textbooks about the truths and complexities of cannabis products and plant types. He's also the cannabis sommelier of, can you say this word? Because I always think I'm saying it wrong.
Sommelier.
Sommelier, not the sommelier, but the I don't mind if I say that one wrong, but the
Interpening?
Yes.
Interpening, sommelier, typicity, terroir, these are fun words.
These are fun words, and it's fun to hear them said correctly. So the Trichome Institute is recognized and government certified in producing some of the most unique and qualified cannabis courses and certifications in the industry. Max is also involved with many cannabis research projects pertaining to new trichome types and terpene mapping. You may have also seen him educating people on psychedelic medicine, and his forte is active cacti, as you will soon experience. Max is a free thinker and highly intellectual with a thirst for adventure, shamanism, and self-alchemy. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Whew. So, you are one with this plant, and let's dig into our audience. I'm going to pull up Facebook Live so I can get your questions. So remember, everyone who's listening, this is for you to ask these tough questions. So we can roll all day long, but if you have questions, now's the time to put them in. I'm going to be pulling up Facebook Live. Max, do you want to start us off with how and when did you realize that you have a very unique connection with the cannabis plant?
Yeah, I was really young. I was very young. And I don't want to go too into my own personal story. I'll just say that cannabis was the thing that inspired me at a very young age that self-alchemy was possible. And so as a magician and as a young magician, I was just so fascinated with the idea of transforming myself and putting myself in different spaces and places of existence to explore. And when you have a very low tolerance to cannabis, that's pretty easy to do with cannabis. And it's pretty gentle with cannabis. So some of those more esoteric explorations I do are very more intense nowadays, very much more adult, and sometimes takes weeks to prepare to go into those deeper spaces. But cannabis was the thing that kind of showed me the way.
So just in case, I mean, alchemy is thrown around a lot, and I want us all to be on the same page, because you mentioned esoteric, you've mentioned alchemy, self-alchemy. What is alchemy? Because so many people probably just think, oh, it's just sort of like harmonizing. But from your perspective, what is it?
Yeah, I mean, well, from like a cultural perspective, people think about alchemy such as how do you turn one metal into another metal, which is alchemy, right? And so a lot of alchemists have this goal to alchemize gold, because you can alchemize gold. And if you can chemically produce gold, how cool would that be, right? So I think that's a good ideology for the basis of alchemy, is taking one thing and transforming it into another. And I think a lot of that is chemically based. It is alchemical alchemy. And so I am, as an alchemist, it's alchemy is not shooting from the hip just to see what would happen. Alchemy is, I know what chemistry this is that I have here, and if I apply this chemistry in this way, I should have a change. I should have an outcome. And so, in kind of an esoteric way, medicine in and of itself is a form of alchemy. You have a certain state of being, and then you've got a goal to change that state of being into a different state of being. And how you achieve that goal of change is with a chemical. And that chemical that's positive for you in that change we'll call medicine. And if it's not, and if it's not for health reasons, then we just call it a drug. And drugs and medicine are interchangeable. And I love drugs. That's what I do for a living, because drugs are so awesome. It's just that people just have to get out of the American mindset that you are taught, in a propaganda program, which is called DARE. $1.3 billion a year to send a policeman with a gun on his hip to scare the life out of children in school by telling them things about certain substances that aren't true. So all drugs must be bad because that's what we were taught, versus the good drugs versus the bad drugs, right? And I'm not really interested in bad drugs in any way. I've never tried them. You don't need to, because they're not interesting. So
yes. Well, this is so good. I could already go into 5 other conversations with you. I want to continue down the plant conversation and ask you, you have an institute called the Trichome Institute. And a lot of people don't understand what trichomes are. They certainly don't understand what terpenes are. Can we get your perspective and expertise on what trichomes are and terpenes?
Yes. So when you open your eyes to the truth of trichomes, what you'll notice is they're everywhere. It's not just a cannabis thing. And so my opium poppies grow trichomes on their stems. Everyone's sunflowers grow trichomes, all over their stems. So the word trichome comes from ancient Greek, trichoma, which means hairs. And so these are the little hairs of these plants. And so if you were to look at a tomato, maybe a seedling, but not like a full-grown plant, actually any tomato in any state, but like when you get a tomato plant from the grocery store and you're going to go home and transplant it, and it's kind of like fuzzy in the light, those are the trichomes. And what's really cool is if you actually take out your jeweler's loop, which we sell 2 different versions of on our website, the tomato trichomes, the largest ones that are visible to the eye are non-glandular. And then if you look deeper past it towards the stem, you can see glandular trichomes that do not have stalks. Cannabis has one variety of that, which is a sessile trichome, a glandular trichome without a stalk. And when you smell tomatoes and you smell that sweetness, it's coming from those glandular trichomes that are gently hiding underneath their non-glandular trichomes, which are literally the exact same thing in purpose as when Starbucks puts spikes above their door so that a pigeon doesn't shit on your head when you get a cup of coffee. Those spikes that are preventing the bird from landing there is the technology of the plant to keep other things away from it, other insects. It reflects negative UV light. It protects the plant with moisture pockets and other things. It's just that when you get into some plant types, such as cannabis, their glandular trichomes can photosynthesize cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids, which it does for very particular reasons. The entire reason why the cannabis plant is going to produce glandular and non-glandular trichomes is for protection only. And so when you smell pine, you're smelling the terpene that it is emanating, A-pinene. And A-pinene is an insecticide. It is an actual poison to small flying insects. And so not only has it produced a sticky trap to catch these bugs so that they don't go any further, but it would be off-gassing poisons and acidic cannabinoids. And so when you look at the cannabis plant from an animal and an insect perspective, it's a force field. It's difficult. That ganja smell that you smell that is so ganja is myrcene. When you smell dank in your beer from cannabis's cousin, Cannabaceae humulus lupulus, the dankness within your beer is derivative from the same terpene, myrcene. And myrcene, which has that skunky bitterness to it, is there to literally be skunky and bitter. So it is an anti-herbivore agent. And so these plants are actually emanating skunky bitterness and beta-caryophyllene pepperness so that they are less attractive to things like deer, so that they don't become eaten even before they grow larger glandular trichomes to protect them in the flowering state.
So is this one of the reasons why they say that cannabis is such an intelligent plant? It's its own insecticide. It has its own protection, almost like its own biofield of intelligence. And yet we still, in our bodies, let's go to the hemp plant, for example, are we doing the right thing with hemp? What should we be doing with hemp in products?
Before we go down that rabbit hole, let me maybe answer something interesting that you pointed out, which is, cannabis's intelligence in and of itself.
Okay.
I don't think people spend enough time realizing or understanding not just how intelligent, but how conscious of a living being cannabis plants are. Now, for all of the hippies out there, they're like, what are you saying, that some plants out there aren't living beings? It's like, no. Yes, all plants are living beings, okay? But the cannabis plant is really different in the sense that you can watch it go to sleep.
Wow.
And so when you videotape your grow room with night vision on time lapse, when the lights turn off, all of the ladies in the room put their fan leaves down. They start to relax from the hard work that they've done all day. And what's really interesting is their heads, the top cola, will actually slump over. And then even more bizarre is how much they move throughout the night, as if they're thinking or dreaming or experiencing something conscious in a subconscious state while the lights are off. And then when the lights turn on, the first thing the ladies do is a sun salutation. They do a yoga pose all together as a community effort. And so when the sun comes up, cannabis will actually lift its leaves from relaxing in the nighttime and will lift them actually higher than they hold them throughout the day, and will hold them up to the sun as they open themselves up to the sun and kind of look up. And then they almost kind of shimmy and shake down and settle and relax to begin photosynthesis for the rest of the day. These plants are sleeping, they're dreaming, they're doing yoga, they're communicating with each other through their root mass in a very intelligent system that's actually working with fungus as an internet that they're tapping into. But even more bizarre than that is cannabis seems to have an ability to remember certain people. And this is where shit gets really crazy. And so when you measure cannabis when it sings, so cannabis actually sings songs. When you put electrodes to it, you can start hearing her singing. And what's interesting is measuring the differences between her songs when she's in the presence of someone who's been taking care of her for a long period of time versus someone who's just brand new to the environment. There seems to be some, I think there is some hyper intelligence happening here that people aren't really aware of. And I could even say more to that, but I want to start answering other questions as well.
Well, we do have a question about neem oil, and it is, what's the 2021 feeling on organic neem oil?
Neem oil is awesome. Neem oil comes from a South American tree called neem. It's the neem tree. And neem oil works great for both molds and as a preventative. What growers do is they don't do enough prevention, and so they start fighting. You don't want to fight with neem oil because you don't want to soak your plant in oils. Oh. And if you were to apply neem oil on your cannabis plant in the morning, that would be the worst thing you could ever do. Okay. Because neem oil on a plant that's fresh and still in its oil state, exposed to lighting, will burn the plant. And in fact, if you see a cannabis plant that someone sprays in neem oil and then keeps it under a grow light all day, at the end of the day, it looks like a Charlie Brown withered up plastic Christmas tree that is very ready for the trash can. And so you want to apply neem oil as a preventative in lower ratios, mixed ratios, and doing it in the evening is best.
Okay, this is really good. It's so interesting to think that, I mean, it makes sense, right? There's certain times as a human body that we should be eating or avoiding certain nutrients, oils, etc., compounds. So plants are the same. And maybe we can have a whole nother conversation about the root structure, because I'm fascinated. My friend Christina Trout has taught me a lot about how plants communicate in that root structure. And you know, it's the same in us. We have a root structure, and without it, like the microbiome, we obviously fall apart. Cells are not at the center of human health. There's something much more vast within us also. Okay, there's so many rabbit holes that we can go down. So I just want to clear up for everyone, when he's talking, and when Max is saying ladies, that's because the ladies, hemp, cannabis, the part that flowers, the cola, all comes from a female plant. So
don't say the part comes from a female plant. The plant is female versus it being a male.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So you know, it's really funny. I love when cannabis experts get up and tell people that hemp is the male part of the plant. Okay. Because you're harvesting it for fiber and stock, right? That's a very old school thought process. What people should be keen on is truly how incredible it is that cannabis is a dioecious species, which is very rare in the plant world. In fact, it is incredibly rare. 93% of all angiosperms on Earth, meaning things that reproduce with a flower system, are hermaphrodites. And or instead of saying hermaphroditic, you could say monoecious. And so there it's a single plant that has all of the sex organs it needs. It just needs a little help from its friends, which is called the birds and the bees. The reason why cannabis's flower produces no petals and is green is because it is not attracting birds or bees because it doesn't want to and it doesn't need to. It is a wind pollinated species, which is called anemophile. And so the male plants, which are entirely separate from the female plants, just like our very own species is dioecious. The male plants will grow much taller than the females. Their male pollen sacs open downwards and literally dump pollen onto the fields of females as the wind blows.
Oh,
That's how that works.
wow.
Yeah.
Gosh, this is just what I mean. Like, there's so much to learn. So let's go back into a learning lesson. So if people are like, wow, I had no idea, like myself, let's talk about your institute and who is a good candidate for the Trichome Institute. What do you teach? What do they come out of this certification with?
So we, as a cannabis education company, our goal is to solve problems in the industry. The biggest problem is misinformation. And so where we come from is reviewed and approved work. And whenever our work isn't correct, we tell people we were wrong publicly. We're not afraid to be wrong because it's actually easy to be confused when it comes to cannabis due to the amount of published information that is just false. So that's the first thing, is publishing accurate and true information, and how we do that and how we go through those processes. The other thing is why don't we have a grow course? Because every school has a grow course.
Okay.
The majority of books in the world on cannabis are on how to grow it. Are we solving a big problem there? No. But do our bud tenders who, in the medical side, have the exact same job as a pharmacist, are they trained, licensed, and certified to understand the differences between topicals, transdermals, sublinguals, suppositories? Because that's what they do for a living. And so to solve problems from a cannabis industry perspective, we make courses that are specific for bud tenders. And because a lot of education and technical stuff is boring and sucks, we make our education fun. We smoke weed while we educate. There's a part where I'm teaching people about transdermal patches, and as I open it, I slap it on Brandon Allen's bald head. Because we're talking about how and why a transdermal patch will work anywhere on the epidermis, and it doesn't have to be targeted in an area such that it seems more venous, has more veins. And so we have fun, like our education's fun and cool. But we have some courses for just brand new people. What is a trichome? What's a terpene? What's a cannabinoid? How the hell do you use a bong? We have a course for that called Cannabis for All. We have cannabis consultant training is our bud tender course. We have an expert course on cannabis extraction and the extracts that it produces. It's 4 hours of really high level expert extraction information. And then there's interpening. And interpening is interesting because it's both for cannabis experts as much as it is actually for people who are brand new to cannabis. And so instead of like starting off on the wrong foot, like indica or sativa, if you're brand new to cannabis, we can start you off with the basics, such as there is such a thing as a broadleaf marijuana type. You can't argue that, but you could argue that it's an indica because it's not. But and then as the spectrum goes, it's a spectrum that will go to your narrow leaf varieties. And so with the interpreting process, we can demonstrate the observable visual physical characteristics of the flower that are consistent with certain smell types, which are consistent with the aroma scent perception. So your first cranial nerve is smelling terpenes, but your fifth cranial nerve is detecting the vibrations that they're expressing as they are either stimulant or sedative chemicals. And the ratio between the dominance in the drug effect is going to be the dominance in the effect type plus THC. And so if you smell things here, these types of things, and your bud looks like that, from a broadleaf marijuana perspective, your physical effect would be like couch lock, your mental effect would be comfortable, your focus would be zoned out, your mood would be carefree, your risk is no productivity, and your activity could be lounging or sleeping. And how high are you going to get? That depends on your personal tolerance. And so, you know, the weed wheel is just like kind of a cool example to that. If you're new to cannabis, we can actually start you off about understanding it, you know, kind of the right way. And I'll show this tool just because it's fun. If you have a piece of cannabis in your hand and you don't know what it is, you can actually measure it with these 9 points of correlation to determine where on the spectrum between stimulant to sedative it is. One more minute, remind me, 15 minutes. Okay.
I've got a quick question for you. If go ahead.
I was just going to say, so if when you open this up, the unacceptable visual and odor characteristics of all of your plant types are listed here. Your most acceptable qualities here. The most dominant terpene smells that you can smell in the psychopharmacy of them here, and back to the beginning. And so these are like cool, fun tools for people to get started. If you want to take interpening to the expert level, where we go into what it means to be a cannabis sommelier, that's where we get into cannabis appellation, terroir, typicity, the technique for determining the psychotropic spectrum of any domesticated hybrid using no lab testing. Wow. And just actually being an expert in what cannabis is. That's what interpening is. And so, you know, interpening is for newbies because we've got lots of great information for them, but interpening is also the kind of thing that blows the minds of a lot of industry OGs.
Oh, well put. I'm gonna read 2 questions for you. Will you show the cover of that book again? Because I don't know if a lot of our audience knows what a trichome is either. So that's what you're looking at. So this is
a
go ahead.
That's a capitate stalked trichome. They're around 150 micrometers tall. And what you're looking at next to it is a non-glandular trichome. So that would be like the spike I was telling you about. This one is called cystolithic, and this one's called unicellular. What's really interesting about this photo is you can actually see the single cell inside the trichome right there. That's how hot this photography is. I fucking love it.
It is absolutely amazing. I agree. There's something absolutely romantic and seductive about it, and the way that you literally expand boundaries on this plant is something I love about you, and that's why I want to have you on the show more and more. This is from Will. He's on our team. Says, Max, on your point about dank beer, do you think that beer, especially craft hoppy beer, interacts with the endocannabinoid system in a similar way to cannabis? I'd love to hear your general thoughts about the relationship between cannabis and hops.
Yes and no, right? And so I read an article recently that made me laugh so hard. People were so disappointed when science came out that proved that terpenes actually don't work on the endocannabinoid system. It's like, why in the hell would you think they would? It's not a cannabinoid.
Is beta-caryophyllene
No, but it's like that, like right, like let's just stop and make sure we know what we're even saying.
An essential oil is not a cannabinoid.
No. No, not at all. No, it is not. So, you know, human beings were born with opiate receptors. Your cannabis doesn't work on your opiate receptors, but your opiates do.
Yes. Okay.
Right. Okay. So does beer have cannabinoids in it to have an effect on your endocannabinoid system with? No.
Okay.
Does the plant hops, Cannabaceae humilis lupulus, being so closely connected to cannabis since they were the same plant 20 million years ago?
Wow.
Does the hops plant produce cannabinoids? Yes. Does hop grow CBD? Yes. It's like, whoa, wait. Oh my God, couldn't we just grow CBD from non-cannabis types for this huge CBD industry? It's like, yeah. And you know how Canadians produce CBD? In yeast. So what they'll do is they will impregnate a yeast cell with cannabigerol, CBG, which
Really?
is the precursor for all cannabinoids. And now that they've got a yeast mama impregnated with the photocopy machine of all cannabinoid producing capabilities, the scientists just whisper in her ear with a drop of a chemical solution, make CBD today. And that little pregnant yeast cell with CBG will just start sending out molecular chains of CBD as it produces it like a machine.
Gosh, literally, this is endless. The possibilities are endless. We got one more. We got a question. I also have a question, so I want to make sure we can get to both of these. Brian is asking, or he is saying, education is key. Natural or big pharma? Who do you trust?
Neither. I mean, you can't trust big pharma because they are historically the reason why you don't have access to cannabis as a medicine, because it threatens 90% of pharmaceuticals that you could exchange it with. They know that. That's why they lobby millions of dollars annually to keep cannabis against the law so that it doesn't challenge pharmaceuticals. Most pharmaceutical drugs are pretty dangerous and should be considered alternative medicine instead of your first choice. That should be the alternative. Like if you can't figure your shit out with breath work, yoga, meditation, mushrooms, cannabis, and maybe a shaman, then you have something more extreme happening, and maybe you need something more extreme, and that would get into Western medicine, which should not be a first choice. That should be your last choice.
Yeah.
And then another term you said is not big pharma. You said big what?
Natural pharma.
Big natural.
He said natural or big pharma.
Not right. If there were such a thing as natural pharma, you're talking about a community of people who have laws and opinions that they've created within their community that they're expressing for the rest of society. That's why I grow my own medicine.
And I love to say we're not.
I don't need any of that shit. I throw some weed seeds in the backyard and I'm fine. It's like,
yeah. And I love to remind people that we are not deficient in pharmaceuticals. And if you just don't wait too long and things haven't gone completely haywire, the body can course correct when you give it what it needs. But the trick there is that you have to give it what it needs.
Well, you have to know what it needs by researching. And it's like, what are you doing with your human life while you've got all this time? Wouldn't you want to become intelligent for yourself to better understand a disease or an ailment you may have and take yourself down that rabbit hole of healing and success, instead of just calling the doctor and saying, what do I need? Let me pay for it, even though it will come with 5 other things that will be even more negative for me in the future, and just accepting that. I think it would be kind of fun if you have your ailment should be fun. That's your life challenge. Like, what were you put here for? To work for somebody else until you die, or to figure out your own shit? You
That
know,
is a very liberating point of view.
yeah, yeah.
Because people have ailments. Um,
It's an opportunity for growth. It's like,
uh,
hey, I've got this thing. I'm gonna figure it out. It's awesome. That's awesome.
this is so good. So I want to dig in a little bit to how hemp can help people with their ailments, because there's so many people that have gotten off prescription drugs, avoided prescription drugs, have healed things that they didn't even know were ailments, because you know you can be in so much pain you don't know, you're not even acknowledging the lack of sleep you have, or the anxiety or whatever it is. How are you seeing hemp help? Let's talk about full spectrum, not the isolates and things like that, but how are you seeing hemp help most people?
Um, well, I'll say this: is there such a thing as full spectrum hemp? Yes.
Okay.
What is the best example of full spectrum hemp? Flower. Why? Because you're getting the entirety of that plant spectrum. So the spectrum would be full. All of its cannabinoids, all of its terpenes, and all of its flavonoids that variety could and does produce is that type's spectrum in its fullness. So I just want to state that.
Okay.
Apart from that, I tell people all the time. I say lots of current controversial things in the cannabis industry all the time, not shy about it. And one of the big ones is how much it drives me crazy when I hear people at conferences or lectures or something where people just say, you know, the greatest thing for PTSD is marijuana.
Yeah.
Or they say cannabis, marijuana, cannabis, medical marijuana, you know, and it just drives me insane when I hear that. It drives me absolutely crazy. And it's because I just want to raise my hand in the audience and ask the expert on stage who's saying this, when you say marijuana or medical marijuana or a cannabis, what does that mean? I mean, because if you're talking about medical marijuana products, you're talking about transdermals, sublinguals, topicals, tinctures, suppositories,
Yeah.
concentrate, hash, vapor, smoke, or just the category of flower. And if you're talking about the category of flower, you are talking about thousands of different biotypes that are different drugs that affect people differently. And so someone here has a particular ailment, and you're saying what works well for it is cannabis, medical marijuana. Which one? there's thousands. What are you talking about? And in reality, a lot of marijuana types have a chemical recipe to cause paranoia or to trigger PTSD. D-limonene, apionine, terpenoline plus THC are chemical recipes for paranoia. Even for people who have established tolerances on cannabis, it's still a chemical recipe.
Okay.
And so do you want to tell a medical marijuana, do you want to tell a PTSD patient that what they should be searching for is a particular variety, a particular strain of this medical marijuana? It's like, how about not marijuana at all? Why don't you take away the equation of certain terpenes plus THC, which does cause a lot of paranoia, and take that out of the chemical equation? Well, now you're talking about hemp. So hemp flower would be a really good thing for people with PTSD to explore, because it
Wow.
has all of the cannabinoids and the terpenes that have been researched and proven to assist people with what they struggle with from a PTSD perspective, without making them feel like they want to jump off a roof when they get the hibbly jibblies from smoking the hottest shit at the dispensary that the bud tender recommended because that's what they like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's so how does hemp work as a medicine? Cannabis works as a medicine. It's about cannabis. Cannabis is the medicine. Hemp and marijuana, and the differences between the two are only a legal perspective from the United States government eyes, but they do have genome markers which are showing to be different from a genetic perspective. Hemp and marijuana types may be genetically separate from each other. But what we're talking about is we're talking about cannabis as a medicine. And then if you want to talk about cannabis as a medicine, you have to get specific. What cannabis medicine? Flower, great. Hemp or marijuana? Marijuana, great. What type of marijuana? Stimulant, sedative, or in between? Sedative, great. And now out of all the sedative medicines, like, you know what I'm saying? This is too complex of a drug to not take it that seriously.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is one of the things I fear about this industry not having high standards, is because we will get ourselves in trouble if people hurt themselves. And, you know, especially around what's happening now. I just read an astounding statistic that anxiety is up by 3,900% since 2019. And we know it's very challenging.
That might have a lot to do with recent politics. that might not be a weed thing.
But people are seeking ways to deal with their stress, right?
Yeah.
And if they go and try to self-medicate with something that makes their stress worse,
yeah,
that's not productive. And so what I've seen personally, and I talk to a lot of people, is that the hemp and the active components in the full spectrum are really helping their nervous system balance out.
Yeah, right. And so now we're talking about cannabis product types. And now we're extracting the flower for its particular essences. And now we're doing real alchemy, right? Because now you are a company who says, okay, here's a subset of chemicals that the plant produces. We're going to put them together to produce a product that is going to achieve a goal. That is alchemy. Cannabis, the plant, is really good at balancing our endocannabinoid system. Endo for endogenous. We produce around 24 cannabinoid types ourselves. And so it's not a miracle that cannabis is in the Old Testament or works this way. It's how it's supposed to be. Our mammalian species does have certain relationships with certain plant types that we've evolved with for medical purposes over millennia, which is pretty damn cool. So, you know, if you have hemp products in pill form, if you have it in transdermal form or topical form or sublingual form or smoke form or vapor form, you have a form of cannabis that is also legal because it's hemp. And so, of course, hemp would help balance the endocannabinoid system. That's what it does. When your cannabinoid system is out of balance or you have an endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome, it's because you don't have enough of the chemicals your body uses to balance itself with. And so what you do is you give it more of those chemicals it needs to achieve that balancing mechanism, such as you not being hungry. That's a cannabinoid thing. Why do you get the munchies when you take too many cannabinoids? Because you're confusing the balancing mechanism of your system that's balancing you. You know, yeah.
So last question, what hemp strains or terpenes do help with anxiety?
What terpenes do help with anxiety? I would go heavy on beta-caryophyllene and linalool, maybe even and humulene. Humulene, beta-caryophyllene, and linalool. So the smell of pepper, the smell of lavender, and the smell of a redwood tree forest.
Oh.
If you've ever visited the redwoods in Northern California, the second you open your car door, you're just immersed in humulene, just fresh forest. It's very grounding. It's very, very deep and grounding. And so those terpenes with a high dose of CBD, the majority of the industry doesn't use dosages high enough for most people's body weight to have an effect from it. right? And so if you had a high dose of CBD with those terpenes aforementioned, I believe that would be an alchemical recipe to achieve calm.
What is a high dose of CBD?
Well, when you're talking about dosages and you're not talking about subjectivity, you're talking about medical science. And the FDA has the medical science on what humans need from a dose ratio of CBD, or else they wouldn't have been able to put Epidiolex on the market.
Right. Yes.
So
Exactly.
that's the easy shit most people just don't think about. It's like, dude, just do your homework. Go to Google and look at what the FDA says is a minimum to maximum standard dose of phytocannabidiol for a human being. And it is 5 to 25 milligrams per kilogram. And so it's pretty easy. I'll do the math for you right now. Okay, calculator.
This is really good. Kilograms and pounds.
Right. So 150-pound person divided by 2.2 equals the kilogram weight of 68. 68 times the minimum dose of CBD, which is 5 milligrams, to wait, hold on. Did I do this right? 150.
So 5 milligrams once a day total.
Divided by 2.2 equals, 68 times 5 is 340 milligrams. So
340. Okay.
yeah, so if you weighed 150 pounds, the smallest amount of CBD that the FDA recommends, that doesn't mean that you couldn't achieve some type of an effect from 100 milligrams. This is just that the FDA is telling you the smallest dose from a highly scientific perspective to give a person that would be at this body weight. If you weigh 150 pounds, the smallest amount of CBD you should be taking is 340 milligrams each time, not per bottle.
Right.
Right.
But,
And then,
but that's also an isolate too. And we're running out of time. Now we're just getting on to and I really want to do a little shout out because I agree, like sometimes people are just not taking enough because they want to make their bottle or their capsules last a really long time, but there's a reason and there's a result that they're looking for and they have to go up sometimes. But at other times, if you're already getting the benefits and you're not at that, especially with the full spectrum, you may not need that much or you might need more, but it's so individualized. Do you think there's a difference between the full spectrum and the isolate in the body and how it works, especially on the serving size?
well, here's the other thing about medical science that is just generally understood. Anything that's digested will take away a large amount of the chemical efficacy. So if you're swallowing pills or eating CBD edibles, the amount of CBD that will get into your blood system and work in your endocannabinoid system is not much because your stomach is going to dissolve it first because that's what stomachs do. If you had terpene and cannabinoid arrangements in an oil that you vaporized, it would be an instantaneous delivery to your blood and brain system through your lungs. Okay. And so if we're talking about dosages, it's like, well, here's 350 milligram CBD pill, and now I'm going to swallow it and only get 100 milligrams out of it. It's like, and so this, this stuff matters. It's what it comes down to.
It really does. And whether you take a capsule or you have a hemp cigarette or a tincture, all these delivery systems deliver different different plant medicine amounts, I guess is what I'm looking for. So I really, really want people to understand that it's okay to experiment. The worst thing that's going to happen if you take a high quality hemp and you take too much of it is you might want to take a nap. You will clear this pretty quickly. The worst case scenario of not taking enough is that it may take a lot longer to get the results that you were hoping for. So don't be afraid. Be afraid of not knowing. And the best way to experiment with your boundaries and what your body needs is to go a little high and figure out where that balance is coming from. And once your body starts to balance out, you may need a lot less because your body already knows how to do the right thing now. It has the food and the information that it needs. Once your anxiety has been settled down, you don't need to nudge that system as much because your body's starting to go, I got this. And now just turn off the news and the other things that are causing the anxiety. That is for another topic. So, oh my gosh. I did kind of tell the audience that we might touch on plant medicine, psychedelics, cacti, things like that. Would you come back on and could we have another show? Because that is also sort of the new frontier of plant medicine in the future with us.
Yes, most people who know my work know that the majority of it's Trichome Institute, which is cannabis based. But if you follow me personally at max.montrose, you'll see a ton of psychedelic education, medicine, law, my psychedelic adventures around the world, which happen often. And yeah, I do different lecture series on psychedelic and psychoactive cacti varietals, all that kind of fun stuff. So yeah, for cannabis education, training, and certification, trichomeinstitute.com, Trichome Institute on social media. Want to know how to talk to aliens and reach esoteric states of being using ancient plant medicines? That would be more personal. So that'd be more of a Montrose thing. So, but I really appreciate you having me on today and having some really good, some fun questions to answer. It's always, this is why I love what I do, right? It's good stuff.
I love that you do this. And just shout out to everyone who's been with us for this conversation. Thank you. Max, I think you bring so much energy and exploration and new adventure to a topic that by no means should be boring, and you keep it lit and alive and so interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you too, Christy.
You're welcome. We'll see you all next week. Till then, go hemp your health. Mwah.
Bye.
Bye.